This video is relevant to you if you've ever had to read anything as part of your academic career. I wanted to make a how to make notes video because it seems to be something that's extremely relevant for you guys who are revising, but first we need to make a how to read video. If you aren't doing the reading right, it's going to make taking the notes a lot harder, so let's get started with figuring out how to read. I discovered that in my first year at Oxford, I was reading completely wrong. So this is the accumulation of my wisdom over the past 3 years, and hopefully some of it will be of some use for you. Specifically, this is advice on how to read for essays and for exams. If you're more of a casual reader of A Song of Ice and Fire, then maybe this isn't going to be your cup of tea, but hey, you might want to stick around for some tips anyway. FYI, there is an outline in the description of everything I'm going to be running through if you want to jump to that bit straight away. Is this piece of text relevant? Is our first point of call. Reading is a huge commitment, especially if you're working under very strict deadlines. In Oxford, we have to read and write an essay of 2,000 words within the space of 3 days. So that's an incredibly strict deadline, and you have to be very smart with what you're reading and how you're reading. So when you've got a piece of text on your reading list, the first thing you want to do is not dive in and read the piece of text cover to cover, because that's not going to be very efficient. The biggest tip for this is to read the abstract. An abstract is an outline of the entire text. It introduces to you the argument and what evidence that the individual is going to be using to support that argument. That way you get an overview and a feel for whether this piece of text is going to be relevant to help you answer the question that you're trying to write an essay for. Obviously, not all texts come with abstracts. However, some texts do come with summaries on the back of them, summaries that other people have done on the internet if you just search for them. You can also read the conclusion to different chapters within the text so you get an idea of what the overall argument is for those specific chapters. With regard to the summaries, no doubt you guys have heard of Sparks Notes. It's not bad to use that. In fact, it's great at giving you a foundation for the text, and then when you read it as a primary text, you are able to build upon that foundation and have a greater understanding of what the text is about. Because ultimately, understanding it is your objective. How you go about doing that isn't necessarily completely important. So you've identified whether the text is relevant to helping you answer your essay by reading the abstract, looking at an outline of what it is that they're arguing. Now we want to actually get down into the text upon figuring out that, yeah, it's going to be helpful. This is where the tip of skimming and scanning comes in. Most of the time when you're reading for an essay, you aren't actually reading the text as you would read, say, a piece of literature. You're typically scanning and skimming over the text. You're going over the headings of the different sections of the text, you're getting an idea of the structure of the text to see how it is that the argument is progressing throughout, so you can identify the relevant sections, and you're reading the conclusions of those sections to see if the summary of their argument and how they've gone about addressing the question you're answering is helpful. Again, this is another form of narrowing down so you can figure out whether or not what you're reading is relevant to your objective. This leads on to the next tip, which is read with a purpose, and I mean a very explicit purpose as opposed to just saying I've got to read this text, this is my purpose. This is something that I did not do when I first started at university, and upon doing it, it helps. It really does help. How does it help? It helps you retain the information because you gain a deeper understanding of the text, because you have a question in mind as to what you actually want to discover from the thing that you are reading. If you combine this with skimming and scanning, you'll have a far more focused and efficient means of going over the text and getting to the bits that are completely relevant to what it is that you need to answer an essay on. Have you ever noticed that when you're reading a text, sometimes certain words pop out at you, such as your name or dirty words? This is because you find them amusing, or because they're very important to you, such as your name, because you've been called it your entire life. If you can give yourself a similar mind frame from when you're reading a text, then those words will start popping out at you. For instance, yesterday I was working on whether NGOs are undermining the state authority in South Asia. So then you can break down your question. You've got some key words such as NGOs, authority, South Asia, and then you've got what is encompassed within those words. For example, with NGOs, I'd want anything related to, say, civil society, international aid, foreign financing, or potentially charities that are popping out at me and all their different names. With South Asia, I'm looking for things that are relevant for India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. And then with state authority, I'd want to see whether democracy is being undermined, whether there have been any backlashes. I'm looking for keywords of political parties, and also potential grassroots movements and their names. Then what I do is go over the different headings of the text that I'm reading to see if those headings and what they're going to be discussing is relevant to help me answering this question with the keywords that I have in mind. For instance, if I see a header of history of NGOs in the 1800s, I might not find that completely relevant if I need to speak about NGOs in post-independence India and Pakistan. So I can discount that section, maybe read its conclusion just to see if it gets to anything interesting, and then go on to the next section, which might be state authority being undermined, NGOs, controversial, which is both a melodramatic and relevant subject header. So far with these tips, you've been able to identify what texts are completely relevant, what areas of those texts are completely relevant. You've been able to have an objective when you're reading so that you're reading more efficiently, and you've been able to implement the tactic of skimming and scanning. That way you aren't going through word by word, page by page, figuring out if this piece of text is completely irrelevant and what I'm actually currently reading isn't at all relevant to me answering the question, but I've got to read it because it's on the reading list. No, that's not how you do it. A way to improve efficiency even further is use a timer. If I'm reading a text, I usually put on a timer of 15 or 30 minutes depending on how long it is, and then that way I'm racing against the clock to make sure that I'm getting as much value as I can from the text to help me answer the question, instead of getting caught up in things that I think are interesting but they aren't actually helping me get smarter at what it is that I need to get smarter on. Plus, I was slightly raised on video games, so racing against the clock and trying to escape before the gigantic boulder crushes me in the Temple of Vara is something that I actually find quite exhilarating, so I'm kind of taking it from my gaming life and putting it into my academic life, and it seems to be working really well. That is all with respect to reading. If you'd like me to elaborate on any particular section, let me know in the comments, or if you would like me to do a video on another specific area to give some tips on, let me know. Next time we'll be looking at how to make notes, because these two, reading and making notes, they go hand in hand. So goodbye, I guess. See you on Sunday, subscribers. And if you haven't watched it yet, here is the How to Study Tips video. And if you are leaving comments, make sure that your settings are such that I can reply to you. Because at the moment, I want to reply to all of your comments and answer all of your questions. But some of you have your settings set that I can't. So just have a look and have a good day. Bye.